Monday afternoon to you. It's 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. Hope you had a great weekend. Things going on. Owners meetings taking place today. And from those owner meetings, Kevin Stefanski, Browns head coach, talked about the remade quarterback room for the Browns, as well as new offensive coordinator Ken Dorsey meeting Deshaun Watson in person out in Los Angeles.
We really think it's important to have a bunch of guys. Obviously, your goal is to have your starter healthy for all 17 games and beyond. That's every team's goal. But we know that is a position that's important for the football team, both in the meeting room, on the practice field, around the locker room. So adding good players is a good thing at that position.
Deshaun got really excited after that meeting with Ken, that he can't wait to work with him. Could you tell that they had sort of a synergy going on and that they were hitting it off really well, or how did that look?
They've spoken on the phone, so obviously that meeting was more about getting face-to-face and getting to know each other. But Ken's a former quarterback. Ken has played this game at a high level, so he understands quarterbacks, understand quarterback play. So those guys hit it off like most quarterbacks do.
With that, let's welcome in Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram, as well as BrownsZone.com on the internet. Nothing earth-shattering, but last year, Scott, when they had traded Josh Dobbs, I was like, I wanted some veteran backups. They have a number of veteran backups now.
Yeah, they got a couple, and I don't know if they would admit it or not, but you certainly, to me, looks like it's a reaction to how last year went down, right? And they weren't prepared with their backup quarterbacks, right? You mentioned DTR was, number 2 on the depth chart. Deshaun Watson gets hurt in week 4. They go to, DTR, and then PJ Walker. It takes a long time to get to Joe Flacco. And, if Deshaun Watson had been healthy all last year, maybe the Browns don't go this way. But the fact that he wasn't, the fact that he's coming off an unusual shoulder surgery, to me, it's important. I think Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski and the organization feels the same way, that you need to have some quality insurance behind Watson heading into 2024.
The other thing is you look at the skill sets. I think the offense will look more like what we expected it to look like last year. I think it's going to look pretty significantly different than it did the year before.
Yeah, and I think we saw steps in that direction right before Watson got hurt. More 3 wides, more shotgun, more quarterback keepers, more option looks, RPOs. I think it's just going to continue to go in that direction.
Yeah, Kevin Stefanski also talked about the remade coaching staff on the offensive side of the ball and how it's working and will affect the scheme.
We're constantly looking for good ideas, whether it's from college or pro, but I do think adding some coaches with recent college background is helpful. Not just schematically, but also understanding players and some of the different challenges of coaching players these days.
At what point did you realize you were going to overhaul the coaching staff? I mean, the Van Pelt move happened immediately after the season, but then everything else that happened. I mean, did you expect to go into the season with 6 new offensive coaches?
I think for me, going back, you're always trying to just find ways to get better. Certainly, there's different years that's going to look maybe like it did this year. Certain years, maybe it's just a difference in scheme, but it's just in the vein of trying to get better is all this.
Scott, I don't know about you. I credit Kevin Stefanski for doing that. They went to the playoffs. You won 10, 11 games with four different quarterbacks won games. You could have sat there and said, yeah, we're good.
Yeah, it's interesting. We probably need to see how this year plays out. Not that the coaching staff's the only barometer of success for this season, but I'm with you. I think, personally, I don't think I would have done that. I think I would have been content with how the season went and, all for continuity and stability, and not a huge fan of change. And I think throughout Kevin Stefanski's 4+ years now, he's shown that he is not afraid to make moves, to switch things up. I think he trusts himself a ton that he'll make it work with the guys, whoever he's got around him, and then he tries to find the right guys or change enough. And he mentioned that college thing, the college coaching aspect of it, and I asked him about that at the combine because it's significant. Tommy Rees and then asked another guy. and it's as you evolve this offense, I think you need new voices. So I think that's a lot of what it was. But, Kevin Stefanski gets along really well with Alex Van Pelt, so it could not have been easy for him to make that move and some of the other ones as well.
Well, as we've kind of expected and talked about, Browns, they're working to reshape the offense around maximizing Deshaun Watson's skill set. Stefanski talked about it.
It's been outstanding. Again, I'm really, really pleased with that room. I'm pleased with how Ken's, getting a collaborative effort from everybody. Again, very fortunate to have Deuce Staley in there. Deuce has played this game at a high level. He's coaching a bunch of different systems. Adding Roy Isfan, Andy Dickerson in the offensive line room, I think, is a great boon for our guys. Those guys work really well together. Tommy Reese, like we talked about, a guy that has recent college experience, adding him into the room. So I think what's been fun to watch is how Ken has been able to get a lot out of everybody. So it's a place where guys are sharing, guys are bringing different things up, and we're throwing everything into the middle of the table and seeing what fits.
And Scott, I think that's why, if you take a step back, that's why they stepped away from Alex Van Pelt. It's why they stepped away from Joe Flacco. They're saying they're all in on a different offense because of the moves that they've made. They're not going to go – they hit default when it was Joe Flacco, and it looked a lot like a Kevin Stefanski offense. I don't think they can do that to get to that next level.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think you're right about Alex Van Pelt. I don't know if the Joe Flacco move is so much about that. I'm not saying it's not part of it. I think the quarterback dynamic in the room and all that goes together, right? But it's about, to me, it's more about supporting Deshaun Watson in every way you can. And I think the Browns feel Jameis Winston is a better resource. He gets along better with Deshaun Watson than Joe Flacco would. Not that there was any kind of animosity between Watson and Flacco, but Watson and Winston have a relationship. Winston mentioned it when we talked to him last week. They're both in the Deep South. Both been through a lot of stuff together. Both high draft picks. And I just feel like the optimism and the enthusiasm that Jameis Winston brings, the Browns really value that. And they value that, how that's going to help Deshaun Watson. And I think the offensive part of it is maybe secondary to that. But, yes, Winston is more like Watson than Flacco is. Tyler Huntley is surely more like Watson than DTR is too. So I think that's it. But the Browns have always kind of said that that's not the main factor when they look for backups.
Oh, yeah, that's, those are all fair. All right, well, one of the things trying to still find out, no decision yet on if the Browns will open the season in Brazil against the Eagles. They are one of a couple of teams that are still being thought of by the NFL. Still no official word. It was a topic that Kevin Stefanski addressed today at the owners' meeting.
If the Browns are chosen to play the Eagles in Brazil, what are the advantages and disadvantages of playing in the very first week?
Well, I just got off the phone with Mo, and he's on top of it, so he'll let us know. He'll let us know if we're playing there. Yeah, we'll see. As you know, it's us and Green Bay. Apparently, we don't know, they don't know, but we'll play anywhere, Tony. Wherever they tell us. We don't set the schedule. We don't really care.
But that long entryway into that first game, is that better than middle of the season?
It's a good question. We'll see. I think the travel itself is the same for both teams. So there's not really an advantage or a disadvantage in that regard. So I'm just waiting to hear, like all of us.
And Scott, he was referring to Maurice Hurst, saying that they were going to open the season, and again, he was just going by the reports. It's kind of interesting. I don't think it matters one way or another. They don't. Whatever the NFL decides, Browns will have to do.
I'm with you. I think it's because we're in a dead period. It gets a lot of discussion. Obviously, it's interesting. It's novel. Nobody's played in South America before, so that adds something to it. But yeah, I mean, if they play in Brazil, it's interesting, but to them a better chance of beating Philly in Brazil than they would in Philly. Who knows? Maybe the players are getting a plane and go down. And
Yep, without question. A little bit of trouble there. We'll clear that up. Browns also announced, and they made it official, the signings of kicker Cade York as well as veteran safety Rodney McLeod back with the team as well. So a couple of more things made official relative to the free agent signings. We're going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, we'll head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports for CLE will continue talking Browns with Scott Petrek. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program is dedicated to recognizing exceptional students, teachers, and schools throughout Ohio. Scan the QR code on screen to nominate students and teachers as Academic All-Stars and Teachers of the Month. They must be currently enrolled or teach in grades K through 12. Is your K through 12 school developing students' literacy skills to achieve success in reading? If so, you can nominate your school for the School of the Year. Students can win $100, teachers can win $500, and schools can win $2,500. Scan the QR code, fill out the forms, and nominate deserving students, teachers, and schools today. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program takes pride in honoring exceptional students, teachers, and schools across Ohio. Submit your nomination today. It's fun, fast, and free. We continue talking Browns with Scott Petrek, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle-Telegram. You can also check out his work, brownzone.com, on the internet. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Can you guys stop with the propaganda to sell tickets every year, year in and year out? All we do is sign people off the practice squad or second-rate players so that when our players go down, we've got nothing after that. And the other thing I'm seeing is Andrew Berry's attempt in the quarterback room is just to make sure that he's got no arguments so that Deshaun Watson can play. I hope Deshaun makes it through a whole year, and I hope he pans out to be the quarterback they want him to be. But I don't see it, especially when you had Flacco there, which I have to be honest with you, the two quarterbacks that are in that room instead of him couldn't really do much of anything. Take care, guys. Have a great week and a nice Easter. Bye now.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Scott, the problem, and Flacco played well. Can he do it again? I mean, there's a reason that he was on his couch in November, and he did play well. Winston's a former number one overall pick. If he was available last year, he would have been. The Browns would have signed him last year.
Yeah, that's probably true. I mean, if they're both sitting on their couch in November. Indianapolis signed Joe Flacco, so there is a market for him, paying him a little bit more than the Browns are paying Winston. So I don't want to diminish what Joe did last year, but it's a fact that he's 39, Winston's 30. That matters. At least it probably matters over a long haul, probably not a week or two or a game or two. But if you start getting 6, 8, 10, 12 games, the Browns, nobody wants to see that from a Browns perspective. But if Winston or the backup had to play, I think the team would prefer Winston over a long stretch due to his age. And I think there is some intrigue into Winston's talent level. Now, you mentioned being a number one overall pick. The last time he played significant time, he was 5-2 as a starter with the Saints. I think he threw 14 touchdowns versus 3 interceptions, or it was 11 versus 3. Then he tore his ACL, and he really hasn't gotten a chance since then. So, I think as a guy with some upside, and as well as Joe played at the end of last year, we kind of know what Joe's upside is.
You also wrote an article, I'm curious. Browns having a solid offseason, still some work to do. Take us through that and kind of your thoughts with it.
Yeah, I mean, you have to start with Jeudy, right? The trade for Jeudy's kind of kicked off the offseason. I think the trade, and I'm sure we've talked about it, was a no-brainer. You give up 5th and 6th round picks for a former first-rounder, talented guy, still young. Now, I think we can discuss whether or not it was a wise move to extend him, give him that contract extension. It's a lot of guaranteed money for a guy who hasn't been to a Pro Bowl, hasn't had a 1,000-yard season. The Browns are banking on getting more out of his potential. And I think Amari Cooper will help with that. And they also feel like the market for receiver, has been going up and will probably continue to go up. And if Jeudy turns into a solid starter, just the number 2, paying him, whatever it is, $14, $15 million a year, that's not a ton, right? Even if it's 16, 18, like that's not a ton for a starting receiver in this league anymore. So they try to get ahead of the market there, but we'll have to see, right? If there's danger in paying a guy, extending a guy who you've never seen practice or play in your uniform. Then outside of that, good job bringing back Zadarius Smith. That was important. The D tackles, Mo Hurst II, Shelby Harris. I think there's a potential for an upgrade at linebacker, Jordan Hicks, and then they took a flyer on Devin Bush. To me, where the work is left is maybe one more D tackle, a young guy. I could see him taking a D tackle at 54, chance to be a difference maker, bring some youth into that room. And then the other position that stands out to me, and maybe it's just me, but I don't think they have a number 2 behind David Njoku. And they're going to go more 3 wides, but what if Njoku has to miss a couple games, right? Like, is Jordan Akins going to be the guy? He didn't do a whole lot last year. Giovanni Ricci's more of a blocker and a special teamer. I think they need to add a tight end, a number 2 tight end that is a threat to catch the ball, and maybe that'll be in the draft. I just think to me, that looks like a weakness right now.
Yeah, but overall, and I disagree with the caller, and that's fine. Everybody's entitled to their opinion. I think the roster's decent to pretty darn good.
Well, yeah, that's the other part of this, Dave, is they went to the playoffs last year, and we all know the quarterback situation, won 11 games, and then bring back, before free agency, 18 of 22 starters on offense and defense, and then you re-sign Zadarius Smith, so that's 19. There wasn't a whole lot of heavy lifting for Andrew Berry to do. So, yes, he could have made a splash at D tackle with Christian Wilkins, but he wasn't going to pay him. I think he got $25 million a year, right?
It was 28.
4 years, 110. Yeah, that's a ton of money. They weren't going to pay that. So I just, Jeudy to me is a little bit of a splash, and that kind of fits where the Browns are from a roster perspective and from a salary cap perspective.
All right, this from Dogs by Nature. NFL free agents, players the Browns could still end up adding to the roster in free agency. They start out wide receiver, running back, kick returner Cordell Patterson. Return of Prochet, addition of Hines likely takes Patterson out of the chase. Not completely, though. He could end up being a little bit of a wide receiver. They go with linebacker Isaiah Simmons, former first-round pick who hasn't developed from a versatile athlete into a solid pro yet, 26 years old. Simmons, the type of player Barry loves to give a chance to. And then linebackers, Jordan Kanasic and Adams, special team kind of guys. I don't know that any of those really, maybe Kanasic just because of the special teams aspect of it. Simmons, he's like JOK that hasn't panned out, and I don't see Patterson. I don't see that one happening.
Yeah, Patterson doesn't make sense to me. I think he's got a background with Stefanski, but, Hines and then Prochet the second. They got Pierre Strong Jr. It feels like they're going to be okay there, assuming Hines is healthy. Simmons, I'll tell you what, you're right about Simmons hasn't done anything, but he's a guy that intrigued me so much coming out of the draft. I remember talking to his college coaches and really, I think that was the Will's draft, and thinking, okay, is there a chance the Browns take him then? So he hasn't panned out, but there's something about that potential that the Browns could take a flyer on him. I wouldn't hate the idea. I don't know if it's necessary, right? They got JOK, they got Hicks, they got Devin Bush. And then, they probably need another special teams ace. So you could bring back Adams or Kanasic. That's fine.
Deshaun Watson on his Unplugged podcast with his quarterback coach, Quincy Avery, talked about Mike Vrabel, who was on the Texans staff when Deshaun was there as a quarterback.
I was with Vrabel my first 2 years. Mm-hmm. Yeah, my first 2 years in Houston, and I saw what he brought to our team.
What does he bring?
Energy, grit. He ain't gonna take no bullshit from nobody. He don't care who you are. Like, he gonna let you. He ain't gonna sugarcoat anything. But he's also a good dude too, and he understands players because he played for a long time. He has rings, with New England. So it's like, it's going to be a great fit along with, Swartz, who's people already know who that is.
Yeah.
And again, Vrabel, a consultant. You tie that to Schwartz because Schwartz was a consultant for Vrabel at Tennessee. It's just interesting. Kind of all weaves around.
Yeah, and I think Kevin Stefanski talked about Vrabel today at the owners' meetings and how they think he's such a valuable resource. And once he was out there and he didn't get a job, Stefanski called him up, and said, "Hey, come here." And I think I like the fact that Watson said that about Vrabel. I think Vrabel can have the personality of, like a hard coach, right? Like a disciplined guy, old school, hard nosed. I know he likes to mix it up. But, Jim Schwartz had a little bit of that reputation too, right? That he could alienate players, or he could be tough to for some players to take on right away, and that they might have to get to know him. But I'll tell you what, the team and the defense and the players embraced Schwartz last year. I think they'll embrace Vrabel. There's a lot of players in Tennessee that speak really highly of him. Obviously, he had success there before the last couple of years. Playoffs, won the AFC South a couple of times, went to the AFC Championship game. So, he's a guy that I think brings a lot of, not reputation, but like there's something about him that brings confidence. I think he adds to the organization, and I think it was a good hire.
Yeah, I was quite frankly shocked he didn't get a head coaching job. He brings credibility. There's a credibility with him.
That's what I was looking for, Dave.
Yeah, I agree with you. And you know what? It reflects on Kevin Stefanski that he's willing to bring a guy like that on board.
Well, there's no doubt about it. And, we thought, because, you hear is he next in line, whatever, and I don't think that played into this at all. But we said that was the same rumblings last year with Jim Schwartz. And Stefanski didn't mind. He took on a guy with a big ego. Jim Schwartz has a big ego, big personality, and they fit great, and he wound up getting the number-ranked defense out of it.
Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter from the Elyria Chronicle Telegram, as well as BrownsZone.com. We're steps aside, take a quick time out. Back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports4CLE. Be right back. Stay with us.
Go ahead and pop a clamp on that. Let's take 5. With one of these 5 Lady Luck scratch-offs from the Ohio Lottery, like this new $20 100X with its $1 million grand prize, I want to get my cut of that 76% payout.
So, good news. We're playing the largest family of scratch-offs ever. These Lady Lucks have all the fun and no complications.
We continue talking Browns with Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter from the Elyria Chronicle Telegram. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hey, Dave, Frank from Cleveland. A couple things here. Deshaun Watson, he needs to shit or get off the pot because he's wasting a lot of our talent in their prime years, waiting on him to be healthy. Number 2, I love the upgrade of linebacker position. And number 3, I think we got enough wide receivers. And I seen they brought Cade York back. Is that true? Love your brother. Be safe, you and the family. And I talked to you before. You sort of wish you had him. Later, bro. Love you.
Sounds good. Always enjoy Frank. Scott, Cade York was brought back, and I think the upgrade at linebacker is kind of sneaky. I agree. It's a sneaky good decisions there.
Yeah, it's interesting because, I thought, well, if they bring Taki back, they're fine. And I like Taki, but the Browns think Hicks is better. And Hicks has had a better career. He's older. Right? I think he's 31 now, and Taki's like 27. But it feels like he's still got tread on the tires. Makes a lot of plays around the ball, right? Interceptions, passes defense, bunch of tackles. I could see him and JOK really flying around, making a difference in coverage, right? Which is so important in today's NFL. So I think there's a chance that linebacker core could be better as well. And then Cade York, that's an interesting one, right? Because Dustin Hopkins was so good last year. Feels like a little bit of insurance policy. Plus, the Browns didn't want to give up on York in the first place, right? They drafted him. They were reluctant to cut him last preseason, but had no choice because he was so bad in the preseason. But then wanted to bring him back on the practice squad, and York chose Tennessee. So maybe this is a case with a second chance. spark something. Maybe working with Hopkins every day in the offseason and training camp will spark something, because it's obviously way too early to give up on Cade York from an NFL career perspective.
Well, and the Browns, when they evaluate somebody in the draft and draft them, they usually give them some time. So it doesn't surprise me that they brought him back at all. Underrated storylines. We aren't talking enough about this from CBSSports.com. For the Browns, they say the quarterback room. Very clear. The Deshaun Watson trade and signing has not worked out just yet. Cleveland entering the third year of a 6-year deal they gave Watson. Now has Jameis Winston, Tyler Huntley, DTR. Why is that? Browns are moving forward with the understanding that their $230 million man is going to be perennially injured. Or is it one of those guys just trade bait? I don't necessarily know that it's either. I think if they get into the last game of the regular season and there's an injury, there are a couple of guys. Winston and Huntley are certainly guys that teams will look at and acquire. But I'm with you. I think it's more they're doing everything they can to try to set Watson up for success.
Yeah, I think that's the main thing. Now, you can never be hurt by stockpiling talent at a key position, whether it's quarterback, receiver, corner, defensive end, right? So if you have 4 quarterbacks and you see an improvement in DTR and you think you can get anything for Tyler Huntley, then yeah, I wouldn't be stunned if the Browns traded him. And I'm sure that played into, hey, we can sign him right now. We want him for the offseason. If we trade him, we trade him. Maybe that's a bonus down the line. I don't think that's the number one, factor in the move. But if it happened, that'd be great. Yeah, I'd argue a little bit with whoever wrote that all we do is talk about the quarterback. So, we might be talking about it a little different way than the writer thinks, but we spend a lot of time talking about the quarterback room.
Yeah, obviously don't tune into this show very often because. All right, biggest winners and losers from the Browns free agent move so far. This is from Yard Barker. And the winners, they say, Deshaun Watson with top 4 pass catchers, Mari Cooper and Njoku Moore, now Jerry Jeudy. Watson's certainly going to have some guys open. Jordan Akins currently stands number 2 guy at tight end. Harrison Bryant signed with the Raiders. Akins is the next man up behind Njoku. And Jim Schwartz. No reason the defense takes a step back in 2024, and free agency is an early sign of that. I think that might be a little bit under talked about is year 2 in a defensive system with most of the guys back and some slight upgrades. As silly as this sounds, there should be a step forward. That defense should be a little bit better. Now they're going to play better quarterbacks, but that defense should be better.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I'm sure Jim Schwartz would agree with that. Now, how it shows up number-wise, you don't know, right? Are they as good as they were on third down? It's hard to duplicate. All those things that they were number 1 in the league in. But there is room for growth, right? We saw how the drastic difference between the performance at home versus on the road. They need to clean that up. What we saw in the playoffs, they need to clean that up. You mentioned the quality quarterbacks they're going to play in 2024. They struggled versus some of those quality quarterbacks in 2023, especially if they faced them on the road. So there's areas for this defense to get better. But you're right. Year 2, they should take some kind of a jump. And I think if you just go by position, they're as good or better than they were a year ago. And guys like Martin Emerson Jr. is a year older. You expect Juan Thornhill to be healthier, right? So there is reason. I think there's reason to expect growth from that defense for sure.
A couple of rule changes approved today as well. They are going to, this is coming out of the owners meeting, they are going to give a team a third challenge if they used one of their first 2 correctly. Used to be that you had to get both correct to earn a third challenge. Now it's just one of 2. And then additionally, the NFL has banned the hip drop tackle. According to sources, it was a unanimous vote on that. So that's where you kind of swivel your hip and fall to the ground and pull guys down, and it's a safety thing. The challenge thing is interesting. I think those are, you have to like that because it's aimed at getting calls right.
I was going to say the same thing, right? I have a hard time arguing with anything designed to get the calls right. And, yeah, I mean, I get why why the rule was like it was, right? You can't be challenging everything. If you get it wrong, there should be a penalty. But I think if you get one right, why not reward the coach? Why not get it right? Now you have to be so careful. You only get 2, right? So I think this gives the coach a little more latitude. And the hip drop tackle, obviously they didn't have any players vote on that because the NFLPA has been a staunch opponent of that. Just doesn't think it's fair to defenders. And we're going to have to see how that plays out. I don't know if it'll affect, the average viewing experience, how many times it'll be called, if defenders are really careful and they miss tackles because of it. But this has been in the league's crosshairs for a while.
Yeah, and again, they're making it more difficult to tackle. You can't hit guys in the head. You can't hit guys low. You can't. They're eliminating ways to bring guys to the ground who are elite athletes. So I understand where the Players Association was coming from, without question.
Yeah, for sure, and I get it. I get why defenders are upset about it, right? And you hear it all the time. How are we supposed to tackle guys? Where are we supposed to hit guys? The league puts it under the guise of player safety, and I believe that that's part of it. I also believe when you see big name players get hurt because of the hip drop tackle, Mark Andrews is one, the Ravens tight end, and we've seen it happen to other people. It's like the horse collar. Jameis Winston got hurt on a horse collar tackle, and it's illegal. It's probably illegal at the time, but you want to get it out of the game. You don't want your best players on the sideline. It hurts the product. It hurts entertainment value. It hurts teams' chances. It hurts competitive balance, all of that. So I think that's what the argument is made to the owners is, hey, if we don't institute this, your best player could get hurt by it. And I think owners see that and be like, okay, let's vote for this rule.
Scott Petrick, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle Telegram, brownzone.com as well. We're going to step aside, take one more time out. Back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason when we return. Sports4CLE, will be right back.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Scott Petrick, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle Telegram, as well as brownzone.com. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hi, Dave. This is Jerry from beautiful Bellevue, Ohio. Got some questions for you. Which group of players do you think could benefit most from the draft? Some of them are getting a little long in the tooth. I'd appreciate it if you let me know. Thanks. Love your show. Bye.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Scott, I think one area the Browns, and it's a little under the radar, that they'll look to upgrade is on the offensive line. They're a little older, a little beat up, and kind of expensive. And those are not great. When you add all those up, that's where that's an area you need to look to fortify with some young guys that you think can play.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I would say specifically the interior of that line, right? Joe Bitonio's older, Wyatt Teller, Ethan Posick, they've all missed some time over the last couple of years. You hope nobody's breaking down, but you have Luke Whippler and Michael Dunn. You don't have a whole lot of depth there. You don't have a whole lot of, maybe highly drafted depth there. Whippler was a 6th-round pick, I think. So could they take a guard in the 3rd or 4th round and kind of groom that guy to be a replacement for Bitonio or Teller? Yeah, I could certainly see that, and I think that's an area that they should address. An infusion of the talent there. The rest of the positions I feel pretty good about from a youth perspective. Maybe another young linebacker, and then I mentioned maybe a difference maker at D-tackle.
Yeah, and the one thing I would say, Andrew Berry, the one thing we're starting to see, he's going to look for guys that he thinks can play multiple years in the league, and those are the guys that he's going to draft. It's not like he's looking to fill holes. When you get into the 4th and 5th round or 6th round, find a guy that you think you can develop that in a year or two can be on the field and be on the field for 2 or 3 years.
Well, especially given the state of the roster, right? Like, and everybody says draft, take the best player available. It's hard to do that when you have openings on your starting 22, right? In 2020, when they drafted Jed Wills Jr. at left tackle, everybody knew they needed a left tackle, and they were going to get it through the draft. Now, the draft set up that year. We can argue whether or not Jed Wills was the right pick, but that was a need pick as well as they think Jed Wills is good. Now, with the state of the roster, like if they didn't take a defensive tackle at 54, they'd still be fine. They still have 5 guys that could make the roster right now. So I think that gives you a lot of flexibility to identify players with upsides and with potential and with the ability to play, like you said, multiple years and play down the road as opposed to having to fit a guy in a hole right now and play him right away. The Browns just aren't set up like that.
All right, this from ESPN.com. So these are the NFL power rankings along with each team's underrated move. They go Chiefs 1, Lions 2, Niners 3, Ravens 4. Bengals were 11th. Browns 12th and Steelers 13th. Under the radar move for the Browns, signing Jordan Hicks, 31. An Ohio native should solidify the position in the short term for what was the NFL's top-ranked defense during the 2023 season. I can't necessarily argue with any of that rationale, and having the Browns just outside the top 10. Tell me how many games Deshaun Watson is going to play, and are you getting the guy that played like he did against the Ravens? If so, that's low.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. To me, it's interesting how people are ranking, and even the gambling sites as well, the AFC North, right? Because you got the Ravens coming back. They're the best team in the league last year, regular season-wise, in the AFC. Joe Burrow coming back to the Bengals. The Steelers doing what they did in the offseason. And then you got the Browns, who were the playoff team last year. 3 of those 4 teams made the playoffs. The Bengals probably would have if Joe Burrow didn't get hurt, right? So how do you kind of arrange those? And the fact is, you have 2 or 3 of those teams that are bunched really tight in most of the things, whether it's odds, you see it different ways. It's going to be fascinating to see how that plays out. There's a lot of good teams in this league and a lot of good teams with fewer questions at quarterback, right? And you're right. That's what it boils down to is I don't think there's a whole lot of outside confidence in Deshaun Watson right now. So for the Browns to even be 12 speaks to everything else. The rest of the roster, the coaching staff, and what kind of season they had a year ago.
Yeah, and relative to Watson, if you didn't see the Browns play and you looked at the numbers, I could understand why you'd have more questions than if you watched the Browns pretty closely. There were games, Tennessee game comes to mind, certainly the second half of the Baltimore game. I mean, that second half, I watched that, I'm like, okay, that's why you go and get that guy.
Yeah, and that's what the Browns are hanging their hat on, obviously. Now, I would say we didn't see enough of it, and they didn't see enough of it. Nobody did.
Yeah.
Against Tennessee, he was good. Against Arizona, he was good. Half a game against Baltimore, he was good, right? But there were games where he wasn't good.
Yeah.
Didn't play particularly well week 2 in Pittsburgh. So he just needs to be more consistent and more available. And if he is, then the Browns have a really good shot to be in that mix with all those teams in the AFC.
Yeah, no question about it. All right, before I let you go, this one from Dog Pound Daily. 4 free agents the Browns were wise to pass on. Number 4, wide receiver Gabriel Davis. Got a $13 million a year contract for multiple years. Patrick Queen at linebacker. Calvin Ridley at wide receiver. And number 1, Christian Wilkins, defensive tackle. I agree with all of them. Ridley's contract was shocking, and I thought Gabe Davis got more than I thought he was going to as well. So, and $28 million for Christian Wilkins, I wouldn't have done that either. I like what they did with Smith. If you look at it, Smith, Harris, and Mo Hurst probably got a little bit less than that $28 million a year.
Oh, I'm sure they did. Yeah, I'm sure they did. And I'm with you. The Gabe Davis one to me was interesting. I liked him as a free agent, but for the same contract, and Jeudy's making just a little bit more than that, if my math is right, I would take Jerry Jeudy, right?
Yep.
Over Gabe Davis. Kevin Ridley was way too much money. I like the idea of him, but not for that. Patrick Queen, I don't think, they got Jordan Hicks, but they were never going to spend big on a linebacker. It was going to be more of a manageable contract. And then Wilkins, if they hadn't signed Dalvin Tomlinson a year ago, right, for 4 years, $57 million, then maybe you break the bank on Christian Wilkins. But you already invested in Tomlinson. You drafted Ika in the third round. That just didn't make sense given what they've done.
Scott Petrak, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Scott.
See you, Dave.
Scott Petrak, make sure you check him out. Brownzone.com on the internet. He is also the Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle Telegram. Always really good Brown stuff. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. Jack Duffin from the Orange and Brown Report straight ahead. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
Here comes the rush.
All right, everybody, let's take 5. With one of these 5 Lady Luck scratch-offs from the Ohio Lottery.
Like the $10 Lady Luck 50X. It's got prizes all the way up to 500 grand, so you could really clean up.
The Lady Luck family of scratch-offs is the Ohio Lottery's first ever, with 5 price points from $1 to 20. They're an easy way to cook up some fun.
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation.
I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams. I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
We continue talking Browns on Sports for CLE. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hi, this is Rico. I have a question about the way futures contract works. An example is the Cade York situation. Is his rookie contract still in effect, or is it voided because of a new contract per se? I'm just trying to understand how it works in regards to a signed contract previously and a futures deal. Thanks.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Let's welcome in Jack Duffin from the Orange and Brown Report. Really good with contracts and the salary cap. So, Jack, how does that work?
So, firstly, I'm not sure where this reporting's come along from regarding it being a futures deal. So, the way futures deals work is it's guys on practice squads that are signed before the new league year starts, because you can only have 53 players until the new league year. So a futures deal is someone that might have been on your practice squad, street free agent. They're signing that deal maybe in January, February time, but it doesn't officially start until the new contract year. But kind of what the question was asking here about, is Cade York's rookie deal out the window? Yes, to an extent. So the rookie deal isn't in place anymore. I'm expecting, we don't have the full deal yet, but it will be a minimum cost for a player with the amount of time he's played in the league. No guarantees. But what will happen is, until a player's done 3 accrued seasons, so that's 6 or more games where they've been on the active roster, they accrue a season. So he's only got 1 accrued season at this point. He would need to do 2 more of those, and then he would become a restricted free agent, which sort of Dearness Johnson, similar names that the Browns have had in that scenario in recent years. then he would go to free agency. So he needs to do a few more years. But if we're going to be honest, he's only on the roster until the end of cut downs. They're going to keep Hopkins, and then they'll try and sign him to the practice squad, in which case they don't keep that control until he's back on the roster.
All right, so take a look at we're talking about official numbers, and we're waiting to hear that. You had a tweet, and it's relative to the Jerry Jeudy contract. So the initial report, $58 million, 3 years, $41 guaranteed. The real number is $52.5 million, 3 years, $28.1 guaranteed. And where a lot of that comes from is the agent kind of making it sound like it's better. That's the initial report, and when you sit around and pay attention to it, you learn that. What do you think that? I mean, the Jeudy deal. If you wait and he performs like you think he's going to, you've been trying to get him for a couple of years. You have to give him enough money so that his agent sees the value and he sees the value in signing. It made sense to me. I know it was a little bit more than most people were expecting, but if you didn't give him a little bit more, I don't know that he's going to sign that for that many years.
Yeah, so anytime you read a report with a contract and it says up to, it should set off red sirens that it's not worth that amount. And then you need to wait for the official numbers to come out. What was pretty outrageous with this report was the claim of 41 million, because it was a complete fabrication. They're using numbers from a previous contract to inflate this. In all honesty, it should never have been reported that way. But that's kind of the power these agents have when they're the first ones breaking numbers. They just throw any old number out there and it doesn't then stack up when the facts come to light. But for me with Jerry Jeudy, if you're looking at that as sort of $17.5 million a year for the 3 years on the back of the extension beyond his fifth-year option, it's fair value for what he should hopefully be. As a top-end wide receiver 2, sort of one of the best 8 wide receiver 2s in the league. So I'm fairly content with that. Will he go on and produce that? That's a question we'll find out. I don't think you look at him and go, hey, he's one of the 32 top receivers in the league. But at the same time, if you want to go out and get a different version of him, your Calvin Ridleys, your Gabe Davis, they're all in relatively similar cost range. So I think it's a really smart move. David Njoku was a similar one, which got a lot of hate at the time of, hey, they're paying for what the player can become, not paying for what he is. So I think it's an upside play.
All right, and relative to that, you tweeted this out, and again, I would encourage you to follow. You see at Jack Duffin, always insightful stuff. So I agree with your premise. They probably view the additional 65.48, so almost $65.5 million, 4 years, about $16.3 million, and you see it. It falls in the range between a Mike Evans and a Lockett, and again, Jerry Jeudy's young, so it is not out of the realm, and the Browns are really good. When they like a player, they give him time to develop, and they've clearly liked Jerry Jeudy. So you see why they were willing to go, and you did a good job of kind of painting where he falls in there.
Yeah, and we're going to see that market absolutely blown to pieces because we've got Amon St. Brown, we've got Chase, we've got CeeDee Lamb. There's another big name in there that's escaping me. Oh, Jefferson. They're probably all 27 to about 32 million a year. So that is going to take it to another level. And the issue is why people say, oh, it doesn't matter, they're different caliber of wide receivers. But when the top of the market moves up, the people below them follow that. So it's smart business to go and do the deal now. And then when the market moves, he's already under contract. The same way like Myles Garrett's paid 25 million a year. It doesn't matter that Bosa's been paid 34. Myles Garrett's already signed his deal, so doing deals early has big upside.
Yeah, and you have to, the agent and the player have to be willing to do the deals, so you do have to pay them a little bit more than you probably want to. I know you've talked about this a lot. Backloading contracts is a significant advantage. Why is that, and why do you like when that is done for the Browns?
Yeah, if we're just going to use a rough look at it, the salary cap goes up about 8% every year as sort of a long-term average. Obviously, there was some different stuff with what happened with the pandemic, but if we look at the left example there, if you pay cash versus cap, so just pay Watson $46 million a year, it's going to cost you 93% of the salary cap over the 5 seasons. But by backloading this deal, we're not even backloading it. This is just 2 restructures, 85.8%. If you go fully backloading it, it's so much less you can bring that down to. I don't remember the number right off the top of my head, but I think it was about 81%. There it is, less than 80%. And that is what the saving is, because if we go back to that first image, look at how quick that salary cap's going up. And I've used a couple of projections to get to that number, but we're talking about a salary cap in 2022 of 208 million, and in 2028 we could be talking about nearly 350 million. So when I say $1 today is worth a lot more than $1 in 2 years' time, that's why it matters. So backloading, embracing the extra money Jimmy is willing to throw at the team is sustainable because the cap goes up, but only if you've got the cash to keep investing now.
And people that are wondering, the cap going up, it's a percentage of the revenue that's generated, and the NFL is just generating the heck out of revenue these days. You also had another interesting tweet, and we kind of laughed at this one. If the 31 other teams spent like the Browns did the last 3 years, the NFL would have paid an extra $4.2 billion with a B, billion dollars. That gives you an idea of the spending that Jimmy Haslam was willing to do on this football team.
When I initially came to the number, I was shocked how high it was, and I've checked it 3-4 times just to make sure the maths is sound. And it's using NFLPA data for how much money's each team spent over the last 3 years. And it was actually a player, Justin Pugh, the guard, most recently the Giants, reached out to me and said, "Hey, can you come on my podcast and have a chat? Because I've read your stuff," and he's on the NFLPA, and he's like, "How do we get these teams to give players more money?" And then when I looked up the number, it was shocking how high it was. So what the Browns are doing is different than everyone else. It's not to say that some teams haven't caught on and trying to move towards that model. I think the 49ers are one that I'm keeping an eye on what they do over the next couple of years. But it's one that the money's there, and if teams want to embrace this, they can give a lot more money to the players, and they're the ones that ultimately benefit by the backloading and investing more and more in your team. And the fans, to be honest. Hey, I'd rather have a team that's spending a load more money because it's a better product to watch than you're being really tight, like the Saints as an example, and it's not been great football.
Jack Duffin from the Orange and Brown Report. Now I can step aside, take one more time out, other side of the break. More talk. Who are some of the guys the Browns might be looking to restructure? We'll talk about that, plus trading up, trading down in the draft. That ahead on Sports for CLE. Stay with us.
All right, everybody. Let's take 5. With one of these 5 Lady Luck scratch-offs from the Ohio Lottery.
Like the $5 25X. It's a nice way to nab up to 150 grand.
The Lady Luck family of scratch-offs is the Ohio Lottery's first ever, with 5 price points from $1 to $20. They're an easy way to break into some fun.
We continue talking Browns with Jack Duffin from the Orange and Brown Report. Would encourage you to read him. Also follow him on Twitter. Jack, who are some of the guys that you think the Browns might look to restructure their contracts moving forward here?
Yeah, I'd say Deshaun Watson's one that I'd expect to come, but I think we'll touch on that later, of the slight variation they'll make to that deal, and it's why he might need to come into Cleveland and sign a slight alteration rather than just a basic restructure that they could do themselves now due to the language in deals. Another guy they could look to, I think Nick Chubb. I think that could be a pay cut and a slightly reworked deal rather than a straight restructure. If we look at restructures, Amari Cooper's one they could potentially look at doing something there, but they might not have the same language in that deal since it was signed by the Cowboys rather than the Browns, so they might not have the same framework that they could easily use to auto restructure. They might have put it in when the deal was redone, and then there's some minor ones that they could look to. They could look to Greg Newsome if he's still around. They could look to Conklin if he's around for the season. But with those two, they might wait right till the end or might not do it if they want to potentially even move someone mid-season, because it kind of removes that option once you restructure.
All right, so you kind of alluded to this, and you tweeted this out. So a 3-day extension for Watson costs team nothing, costs player nothing, and it could save the Browns $53.6 million off the 2027 salary cap. You wrote an article about it and how it would work for the Orange and Brown report. Take us through that, what you found out, and kind of the thinking there.
Yeah, so they've kind of done similar stuff. It was within Zadarius Smith's deal. It never got there because he was extended, but Jadeveon Clowney previously. What some teams will do to add an extension onto a player's deal, they'll say, hey, sign, in theory it's a full another year, but they'll put something ridiculous in it and say, like, on the 3rd day of the league year, we'll pay you $100 million roster bonus if you're still on the team. So what that's going to do for the team is that they would just cut that player on the 1st day of the league year and use that post-June 1st cut. So similar thing like the Saints did with Jameis Winston, just to allow him to get onto the market. But by making it a post-June 1st cut, you can just spread and move that dead cap out. So they'd give him this extension, which if you looked at it on a piece of paper would say, hey, he's got $101 million for 1 year, but they're going to cut him on the 1st day, so he would never actually see a dollar of that extension. But then they can move that salary cap out. So rather than be potentially hit with an $89 million dead cap the year after he leaves, break that over 2 years. It just makes the whole thing more manageable. And it's when we touched on the graphic earlier of like how much money you can spread it over years. It stops you having a deal that's costing 96% of cap over the time you've got him down to less than 80%. So that's where the saving comes from, because as we looked, the salary cap is going to be so much higher. So every year extra you can push a deal like this out, it's beneficial to do.
All right, we kind of alluded to it. Greg Newsome, 5th-year option. Do you think the Browns pick it up?
I think they're going to try everything they can until the 2nd of May to trade him. And that's a really key date because that's the date they've got to decide on the option. Because in theory, they could pick it up and then still trade him after that. But you've probably got your best leverage before that date. So it could be one where they look at the roster and they go, look, we don't really need the draft pick this year. We need it more next year. Now the Snead deal's done, teams might start calling, but it could be one that happens maybe after the 1st day of the draft. It could be one that happens after the draft entirely, but before that 2nd of May. It's going to be worth $13.377 million. That's the projected number from over the cap. So why it's a good deal for a boundary corner, it's a vast overpay for a slot corner. And that's kind of the difference here, where another team could look at Greg Newsome and go, this is our cornerback 2 on the team, a really good boundary investment. To the Browns, he's not going to achieve that value playing in the slot. So I'd expect a trade, if I'm honest, but it could certainly be one where they pick up the option, they play this year, and then they just flip him for like a 5th or a 6th in a year's time.
Yeah, and again, you have Martin Emerson, doesn't have that 5th-year option because he was a 3rd-round pick. So they've got that coming due where they're going to have to redo his contract as well. You tweeted this out, and it's really interesting. What does trading up, trading down realistically look like for the Browns at 54? Trading up, you say picks 54 and 85 for 46 and 117. You say trading down 54 for 60 and 160. Take us through which of those do you think is more likely, given where the Browns sit, and in your mind, what determines that?
Yeah, so with these, I looked back at the last 5 years of trading up or down from 5 picks either side where they're drafting, just to get a sense of, well, what does the market tend to do? Because you get some crazy offers if you're using sort of mock draft machines on different websites, but I kind of prefer to look at what's really happened to get a sense of the market. And moving back sort of 5 spots, if they like someone there in the draft, it makes sense to move back and add a pick around 160. That's similar pick to what they traded for Amari Cooper. So people love to say, oh, a pick that late is useless. Well, if you think Amari Cooper's useless, I don't know what football you're watching, because there is real value to having more picks. So I would make that move. But it's going to come down to, if they're sat there on the board and they're like, hey, we like 4 or 5 players, someone's offering us a trade back, you just take it. I don't think trading up's that likely.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Unless there's somebody that slides, in a la Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. That was a guy that kind of slid. If something like that happens, Andrew Berry may trade a pounce.
You never know.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Jack Duffin, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Jack.
Have a great evening.
All right, Jack Duffin, make sure you check him out. As you can hear, always really good stuff. Orange and Brown Report would encourage you to follow him on Twitter. Very insightful stuff relative to the roster and the salary cap. It's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.